Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. If you've been tuning into this stream for the past short while, I hope you enjoyed that Fantasy vs. Party series. I know I enjoyed it a lot myself. As always, for the Rules of Engagement, I'll be your host, Nick Axslav Ranish, as we explore strategies and tactics used by pro gamers, how you can use those tactics to enhance your play back at home, and how you can more understand everything that leads to a victory in competitive Starcraft 2. So before we get into today's episode, let's talk about what we're going to be doing for the rest of the week. So we're going to have a little bit of a change of show structure going forward here. So basically it'll air every day after the Winter Showdown match, and the content of tomorrow's episode is going to be today's Winter Showdown match. Wednesdays will be Tuesday's Showdown matches. Take a look at a couple of those matches that we have planned for the week, and you can see exactly what's going to be coming at you guys. So, as you know, it's Party vs. Fantasy. That was today. That means tomorrow, Rules of Engagement will be analyzing that match. Tomorrow at 5 is RoE vs. Hero, which means Wednesday, right after the Innovation vs. TY match, we'll be doing analysis on RoE vs. Hero. Innovation vs. TY will be analyzed on Thursday, etc. So whatever match you see, the next day on Rules of Engagement, that will be analyzed by me, basically. And we can check out all the strategies and tactics used that led to that victory in this extremely important match that determines who goes to Dallas and who doesn't. Today, though, we've got one of the old, more conventional formats. Let's take a look at what's in store for you guys. It's going to be regular talking tactics, starting with a couple pro replays. So first, we're going to take a look at LZgamer's Zerg vs. Protoss in the LZgamer vs. Mana game. Then talking about how to open mech in Terran vs. Protoss and the things you got to watch out for in Lomo vs. Baby Knight. Then talking about how you can play Phoenix Mirror in PvP with Baby Knight vs. Bones, who's a Grandmaster on the beta. Of course, the last part of the show will be question and answer, so tweet me any questions at axslav. I'll grab them at the end of the show. If I don't quite have time to grab your question, I'll answer on the next show. So fear not, your questions will be answered for sure, as long as it's not some weird, crazy question. But if it's anything that's answerable, it will be answered. Let's jump into our first segment, though. LZgamer's Zerg vs. Protoss. A couple things we're going to take a look at. One, talk about how it's good to open greedily in Zerg vs. Protoss. Then we're going to talk about the different upgrade paths you should be thinking about when going Mutalist and Swarm Host as a combination. And then the ideal execution of this specific unit combination that LZgamer is going for. So we're going to jump into the game, and we're first going to talk about opening greedily in Zerg vs. Protoss. So we can see here, we'll play out the replay from LZgamer's perspective, is that it's 8 minutes, he hasn't started Lair Tech, so his Lair Tech is very late. He also doesn't have a Roach Warren yet, and he's got 3 hatcheries, so his 4th hatchery isn't super early as well. All this is because he got fairly early double Evo Chambers to really invest in these early upgrades. He's also getting Spore Crawlers, so he's safe against an Air Threat or Dark Templar, both of which are more popular. In fact, if you were watching the stream just a minute ago, you would have been aware of how deadly Oracles can be to an undefended worker line. So it's very, very, very good that LZgamer has these Spore Crawlers just in case an Oracle flies in. He's got to make sure that his drones are safe. So the one question everyone has is, wait a minute, let's say, well, before he sees his Phoenix, what would I do if I'm playing this greedy and my opponent does some 2-base Mass Gateway timing, some 2-base Immortal timing, something that I'm really going to want Roaches to beat straight up out in the open? Well, here's what you do. Let me actually really quickly open up this overlay pen mode. And what we want to do is talk about what he should do. So let's say his opponent's going for a 2-base all-in, right? What he wants to do is he wants to sacrifice his 3rd base. Because trying to defend 2 different locations, trying to defend this location right here and this location on the minimap, trying to defend both those locations is going to be very, very difficult. So what he's got to focus on instead is just holding this area here. As long as he can hold his natural, he can give up his 3rd, make a whole bunch of spines here. Spines. Make a whole bunch of spine crawlers there, and then he's going to be in great shape because even with 2-base versus 2-base, he's got the tech advantage and the upgrade advantage. So he dissects his 3rd, pulls all the drones. Those drones turns into spines, and he should be okay against a 2-base timing. This is something that a lot of Zergs are afraid about, playing so greedily, is because if you play very greedy in your opening, the problem you have is, what do you do if your opponent comes and tries to kill you? You have to lose the 3rd base. And you're like, well, what was the point of playing greedy then? Because I lost the 3rd base, now I'm at equal bases. The secret is if you're going to plan on giving up the 3rd base, you have to tech very aggressively. That means upgrades and get those layer units out. Avoid getting roaches. Because if you're on 2 base versus 2 base and you're on roaches, you're in trouble. But if you play really gritty and skip roaches, it's totally fine to be on equal bases versus the Protoss because you've got your cost-efficient units, your infestors, your mutalisks, your swarm hosts. With those types of units, you can all of a sudden trade efficiently versus Protoss, and it's okay to be on equal bases. So as you get back in the game, we can see his opening was very, very greedy, but if his opponent did a timing, he would simply sacrifice his 3rd base, pull all the drones away, build a ton of spines here. So of course he has to be careful about scouting, but as long as he can see this coming, when it leaves the Protoss base, he'll be okay to just sack the 3rd, get all spine cores up in time. And he has the money to do that because he's saving up this money for his lair tech units. He could instead use that money on spine cores. Now the next thing we're going to talk about as we go through this replay is what type of upgrade pass should he go for, right? We can see that he's going to be going for, he's getting this infestation pit here, and then he's also getting a spire down here. So he's going for both Mutalisk and Swarm Host, already getting that Swarm Host upgrade. And the one thing that you can see is he's getting the melee upgrade and the Carapace upgrade in these evolution chambers. So if you want to go Zergling heavy and then potentially switch to Ultra to late game, you should be getting those that melee upgrade for the Zerglings and the Ultralists. Of course, if you're going to go Mutas heavy, you should upgrade to air as well, but that's a side point. But if you want to get a lot of Swarm Hosts and then implement a ton of Queens in your combination as well, that's where you want to get the range upgrades instead of this melee upgrade. So it's kind of a choice. He's choosing to get the melee. He's going to focus mostly on Mutalisk, not so many Swarm Hosts. He's not going to use a lot of Queen support either. He wants to have a stronger potential Hive Tech transition. So now we talked about those upgrades. The last part we're really going to talk about is once you get to this deadly unit combination, if you got your Mutalisk, you're going to go harass them with them. Even if your opponent's ready, it's still not terrible because as long as you mark them well, you can get some damage done. You got your Mutalisk, he's building the Swarm Host. How should he execute this combination of units, right? And so each unit has a specific purpose, right? The Mutalisks are here to do basically three things, excuse me. You want to make sure you can snipe both Colossi and Observers to make sure your Swarm Host stays safe. And the other thing you want to do is you want to force your opponent to spread out their units, right? You want to force them to put some cannons, some stalkers, some phoenixes, whatever it is in their main over here. Force them to put some extra defense in their 3rd base over here. And then, of course, that'll weaken their frontal defenses. And the weaker their frontal defenses are, the more damage these Swarm Hosts can do with these little attacks. If they put all the units in the front, your Mutalisks should be free to go and do damage into their main. So the Mutalisks are there to spread out the Protoss army and to snipe Colossi and Observers, which are the bane of Swarm Hosts. Your Swarm Hosts need to do 2 things. One, they need to stay alive. That means they should stay away from opposing forces. And the second thing they should do is they should do constant damage output, and that does better if you can keep the enemy spread out. Now, as soon as the battle starts, right here, it's important to focus your micro priorities. Let me clear this little screen here. So what you want to do when you're using this combination is remember the Mutalisks are there to focus down the Mutalisks focus down Colossi and Observers. So as you see here, he's got this Overseer coming in here. He's there for spot for the Observers. Until he sees an Observer, he's got a target over here and a target over here. It says, I want to kill those Colossi. Once I kill those, my Swarm Hosts are going to be much more effective as those little pig-like locust creatures are vulnerable to area of effect damage like the Colossi, but they're very strong against your basic gateway units. So he's going to knock out these Colossi, and then he's going to look for an Observer. In this case, I don't actually see one, but there is an Oracle, and the Oracle can sometimes observe as well, so we should try to make sure he kills that if it's using its reveal ability. So we can see here that's exactly what it's going to do when he comes into this battle. Begin the game, you can watch it being played out. He's going to focus down Colossi number 1, focus down Colossi number 2. You see the Oracle is actually using its Envision ability right here. So that's how the Swarm Hosts are being detected. That's how the Phoenixes are able to kind of lift one of them and get rid of them. Now, as soon as the Mutalisks killed those Colossi, they ran away. The reason you run the Mutalisks away is because which would you rather have take damage? Your Mutalisk or your Locust? You'd obviously rather have the Locust take the damage as it costs you absolutely nothing. So this next Locust Swarm can come in here and do a lot of damage now that there's no Colossi anymore to really keep killing those units. Now, the one thing we can notice here is these Phoenixes are being annoying. right? And you know, potentially with really great micro, they could wipe out this entire army. So this goes back to what I was talking about at the start when I talked about your upgrade combination. In fact, let me bring this touchscreen back up and erase these two notes here. I mentioned that if you want to go Zergling heavy and have a stronger high-tech transition, you should get the melee upgrades. But another way to play this is to get a lot of queens and maybe bring up some drones, push the creep forward aggressively with a ton of queens throughout the game. And then you can supplement this army with a lot of queen support. That is two things. You can transfuse the swarm hosts, and queens are Zerg's best anti-air in the game by, well, queens or infestors. By far, your two best anti-air in the game as a Zerg are queens or infestors. It depends on what type of air, how well it's spread, etc. But queens and infestors, if you're going gas-heavy units like swarm hosts and mutas, it's hard to edit infestors. So queens are your best anti-air supplement. So if you had creep here and you put, you know, maybe here you had some queens, right? We'll put Qs for queens. And then, of course, you had some spore crawlers or spine crawlers around here as well. All of a sudden, your formation is much, much, much stronger if you have all this additional, you know, like little block of really strong defense there. It's very, very hard to break it. That's another way to play it. But as it is, you've got to just try to micro this melee and utilize the fact that they regenerate energy very, very effectively as you go through here. When the Phoenixes pick at you, your units can quickly regenerate and get back up to full life. Now, the mutas are doing a pretty good job of making sure that Protoss has units in the main, making sure they have units here, so that wherever you send these locusts, they're going to do great damage, right? Even if it's just killing buildings, you're killing something for free. What you've got to be careful of is when you utilize these swarm hosts, is how far forward they are. Now, notice when these locusts get into battle, they still have plenty of time left. They still have 18 seconds left when they're engaging before they time out. So you could really have these swarm hosts quite a bit further back, and they would still get in and do damage. And, you know, it's okay to have them forward, except it's a little bit risky, because if your opponent sees that the locusts just leave the base, that's their opportunity to blink down and do a ton of damage. It's exactly what man does now. Notice as the locusts have left, they're not on cooldown, so the stalkers can come in here and kill a lot of these swarm hosts. So here's a situation where, remember, the purpose of those swarm hosts is to actually get back and make sure they stay alive. So let me erase this part here real quick again. And the whole idea of those swarm hosts is that after they summon locusts, right after, when there's no freckles on their back. When they have no freckles, you can pull them all straight back and burrow them further back. And then once they get the freckles, you can even leave them non-burrowed. Just leave them standing around, get them farther back, and then as soon as you see the freckles go on their backs, that means they have the locusts ready. You burrow them, those will spawn, they go forward, and you can unburrow them and reposition them again. So constantly repositioning those swarm hosts can really help in trying to keep them safe, because they don't need to stay buried. They only need to be burrowed right when the locusts are spawning. The other factor, of course, is you could grab your trusty Overseer and your Crowdrest and your Mutalisk and try to grab this guy right here and kill him. If you kill that Observer, your Swarm hosts are very safe, unless they have Storm that can, well, they have enough life, Storm can't really kill them. So there's a couple of things you can try to do to keep him safe, because if you don't do that, all of a sudden you're at the vulnerability spot where they can pick off your Swarm hosts. Of course, this campaign has lasted long enough that even after killing these Swarm hosts, LZgamer is still in a great position. He still has his Mutalisk flock. He's killed all the Colossi. His economy is great, whereas Mana's kind of struggling to maintain a ground army. The Locusts continue to kill more and more and more units throughout this. And so, you know, he's going to continue to basically, he's in a position where he can continue to win. But you know what? It would be easier to win if he hadn't lost those 5 Swarm hosts, if he took a little bit better care of those guys. Made sure that those Swarm hosts, when they were vulnerable, you unburrow them, back them away, or you support them with Queens and Spine Cores, or you're very, very, very aggressive at sniping those Observers or any detection your opponent might have. So that wraps up how to use this combination of Mutalisk and Swarm hosts very effectively. Remember, feel free to open greedily, and just be ready to sacrifice your third and build plenty of Spine Cores for defense. Also, make sure that your Mutalisks are sniping Observers and Colossi and spreading out your opponent, and make sure your Swarm hosts are safe, that they're always away from the opponent's units. If your opponent's closing in on them, feel free to unburrow and pull them back as long as they're buried. When they get those freckles on the back, that means the Locusts are ready to go. Wraps up this segment. We're going to take a short break and be on with our next segment, which is going to be about how to open with mech and construct a mech opening against Protoss playing as Terran.